Okay, and there we are. We are live. So good morning, everybody. My name is Inge Nickel and I'm the director at the Braston Centre, and I'm joined here today by Sarah Lamb, who is our communications officer, and Professor Nadia Reissland, who's got a very special interest in fetal development. So we had a very, very busy week. And it's been so interesting to hear from professionals and parents, and we have just had a wonderful time learning about baby communication and how people are working with parents and using the NBAS or the MBO, which we offer at the Braston Centre. So today we're really looking forward to hearing more about how babies communicate in the womb and how they kind of start preparing for the outside world as well. So thank you so much, Nadia. And
thank you so much for inviting me. It's a real pleasure. So I'm very, very keen on making sure that parents and also professionals, of course, know that it's not only starting after birth or at birth what happens, you know. Like there used to be a long time ago this idea that babies were living in the blooming, buzzing confusion, and then people, of course, realized that babies are very well advanced. And this is how my career started. I started off actually in London. Like I was at the London School of Economics doing psychology there, and I started off interviewing children, like children who were like interested in football actually. And they were like teenagers, you see. And then I went down towards younger children in a hospital in London, looking at pain and fear of an operation. And those were like younger children, like children who were like up to like 3 years or so, you know. And then I thought, well, they still know a lot, you know. So then I went down to babies, and I did a study of like newborn babies actually in Nepal, looking at imitation and how those babies could imitate different mouth movements, which I then took on to the fetuses. Okay, so it seemed to me at every stage when I was doing studies, I felt that there was something before which we needed to find out about before we could actually say why something is happening at this later stage. So that's why I'm so keen on fetal development, because I believe that we need to look at this very, very early stage of development if we want to do interventions, for example. And I'm especially keen on looking at maternal mental health in relation to fetal development, because it's the mother who is, of course, having the baby in her womb, and her own feelings, the way she behaves during that pregnancy, in terms of, for example, her lifestyle, or also whether she eats certain foods and so on, you know, it all makes a difference of how this fetus develops. So I never ever want to tell people what they have to do. So I'm not telling you to stop smoking or to eat certain greens or whatever, you know. What I'm interested in is actually to find out what is there and then let people decide. And the other thing which I need to perhaps as a preamble say is that I'm very, very keen on this idea of a two-patient model, where the mother is one person and the fetus is the other person, and what is good for the mother is not always good for the fetus, and the other way around. So basically it's the mother's body and she has to decide, and what happens to the fetus will be influenced by her decisions, but the fetus has got different demands perhaps, which might sometimes not go together with what the mother needs herself. Okay, so now going on to my sharing of the screen. Yeah,
thank you.
Just while Nadia is getting that up, just to say, if anyone has any questions at all, please do put them in the questions section under the video, and we will try and cover them at the end. So yeah, do ask any questions.
but if people have questions in between because they don't understand something, I'm very, very happy to kind of stop and kind of answer the questions at any time. All right. So it is a bit, well, professional, basically. So I hope I will make it clear enough to everyone. Okay. So I'm Nadia Reissland, and my email address is there below. If you want to contact me, I'm at Durham University. Oops. So the question is, what happens before birth? Okay. Now, of course, there is a lot of investigation, which is basically medical investigation in what happens to the fetus. But what I'm interested in is the psychological impact of pregnancy. And this has then led to this new area of studying psychology in the womb. So I actually give a course for third years in Durham University, third year students, and also for master students on psychology in the womb. And I have got PhD students. So anybody interested in doing a PhD or an undergraduate, you could learn about that in Durham. So I'm interested in this kind of idea of looking at it objectively. Parents, of course, have their own views and their own interpretations of what the fetus does or how it feels. And that's absolutely fine and correct, you know. I only want to say that what I'm looking at is more this kind of trying to be objective, trying to analyze things, not being involved in it so much, you know, like emotionally, to just find out what do fetuses do prenatally. Here you can see a really nice example of a fetus who shows very smooth arm movements, okay? Now, how smooth or how jerky arm movements are might indicate whether or not the fetus is stressed. So here you can see one which is a very jerky, you know, like more like a punching movement. And here you can see the kind of more smooth movement. And the idea was we looked at how those fetuses behaved, and it seemed that the fetuses who showed more of these jerky movements seemed to be more stressed prenatally. I have edited a book with a professor from Canada called Kisilevsky, and there you get loads and loads of information on fetal development, also non-human development in the fetus, basically. For example, there's one article on what happens to mice when they go up in the moon. So it's a really nice, very much an overview of a book of fetal development. And my chapter is in there as well of how do I code. So for my research, I use the GE Volocin E8 or E10, so the latest machines basically, to analyze facial movements, and we code frame by frame. So I just said I'm trying to represent the view which is like not related to emotions, but actually looking objectively at the world. So we kind of do this work which by coding movements frame by frame and making it emotion free. And you can see here there's an expression which you might interpret as an emotion, like it's frowning or anger. But what we want to say, we take each of the movements and we give it kind of a term, like it's based on FACS, basically, facial actual coding system by Ekman and Friesen. And so we analyze each of these movements of the face, which there are a lot of them, frame by frame, in order to kind of develop a kind of idea of how does this fetus behave in the womb over time. And you can see here, this is a 2D image and there's a 4D image. We use both of these images, but the 4D image actually gives you more of this facial expression view than the 2D, which is more the bone structure. And we do, as I said, frame by frame analysis. Here you see just one coding scheme, and you can see the number of movements we code. And here we can see, for example, lip pull, which looks more like a smile, for example, or a mouth stretch when the mouth opens up. Or whether they show their tongue. We can look at all these movements and then code them and see whether they happen at the same time, which means it becomes a more complex movement, or whether they happen singly by themselves, which is less complex. So, as I said, you could kind of see this as an emotional expression. This is, by the way, Ekman himself. And you can see he's frowning, and there you can see the fetus. And you can see the same movement of this fetus basically frowning. Now, we wouldn't call it frowning, but parents would call it frowning because they see it as an emotion. And hence these 4D scans might actually help with regard to bonding, because you can relate to the fetus already as if the fetus is a baby after birth. Here is an example which I'm going to show you a little bit more about of fetal eye blink. Normally, of course, the eyes are closed when the fetus is in the womb in this kind of liquid environment, but they also open their eyes, so they show an eye blink. And here you can see head turn. This is actually a twin turning the head towards the other twin. And you can see the eyes there, but more the eyeballs. And there you can see the ear of this twin. So we want to look at, is there already a kind of presence of interest in social stimuli in the womb? And for that, we wanted to look at something which is comparing face-like stimuli, because of course the face is very, very important after birth, with non-face-like stimuli. And we control, again, for maternal stress and depression. And what we found is when we looked at a smiley face made out of red LEDs, so we had 12 red LEDs, and there is this, there are the eyes and the mouth, and then this was an upside down smiley face, again with the mouth and the eyes there. And then we had as a control stimulus these kind of stripes. And we found, to our real surprise, that in fact fetuses seem to be turning more towards the face-like stimuli. It didn't matter whether it was upside down or the other way around. In babies, it does matter, but in the fetuses, at least in our study, it didn't matter. And then compared to controls, they seem to be less interested in these controls. So there might be an idea that at 32 weeks gestation, fetuses already seem to be somehow interested in more social stimuli compared to non-social stimuli. This is a study which we did. It's a smaller study, and we need, of course, money to do a much larger study with many, many more stimuli. So that's something we are hoping to kind of get money for and do more work on. But this is just to give you an idea that in fact, it looks like as if fetuses seem to be predisposed to be social in the womb. Now, of course, when you are developing fetus, you have to learn about your body. And we have got collaborations with Tokyo University, where Kunyoshi is a professor, and he does work on robots. So what we do is we give like data which we have for our fetuses in order to create these robotic kind of ideas of how a fetus might develop. And what they did is they looked at robots and the sensitivity of different areas of the body in order to kind of understand how fetuses might learn to develop a body understanding, which is then represented in their brain. So we are looking here at what they call a cortical map. And here you can see the sensitivity of that fetus. So you can see that the hands are very, very sensitive. You get many, many more sensors there. And here at the face as well, and the ears, the nose and the mouth especially is very sensitive. And then also the toes. The rest of the body is also sensitive, but less sensitive. And so basically by having this pressure in the womb, Yamada and Kunyoshi argued that fetuses learn about their bodies, and they learn about how bodies move in space, and creating this kind of body image in their brain, which then means they can control body movements. So fetuses, as I said, kind of actually look at lots of things. Here you can see the eye opening and the touching of the mouth. There's the umbilical cord. That fetus is trying to get the hand into the mouth, basically. So we look at touch behaviors all over the body, but also specifically in the facial region. So they touch their face, and we kind of analyzed upper face touch, mouth area touch, side face touch, and lower face touch, just to show you that we actually look very specifically at different areas of the face. And here you can see how this fetus actually, like it's a study where we looked at fetuses and from 24 to 36 weeks gestation, how they were learning how to actually bring the hand from far away towards their mouth, potentially to get the hand into the mouth, which is something which they seem to be very attracted to, because they do touch their mouth a lot once they can manage to get actually the hands towards the mouth, which is quite a difficult thing to do. So we found that as the fetus grows older, they are getting more and more specific in relation to which area of the face they can touch. We also looked at handedness in the fetus, and what we found is that fetuses do show preference for one or the other hand, but it depends on how stressed the mother is. So the more stressed the mother was, the less there was right-handed touching behavior. So we had reduced right-handed touch in stressed mothers. So if the mother came and she reported stress, for example, at 24 weeks, then we would kind of get reduced right-handed touch. When she reported then no stress the next time at 28 weeks, that was disappeared, okay? So basically it was very dependent on how stressed the mother felt the week before we did the scan, which influenced then how the fetus would touch, either more with the right hand or more with the left hand. Again, all my studies which I'm mentioning here are actually cited below, so you can check it out and see the complications of it, okay? Now with regard to twins and singletons, of course, it's a really interesting question of what happens to their body map or images, because basically they have not only themselves to touch and the womb environment, like the cord, they often touch the cord, you know, but also another human in the womb, which is the other twin. And here, this study has just come out where we looked at twin touch behaviors, and you can see here an arm coming up of that twin, and that twin is touching the other twin. And what we found here is when you look at, say, we compared here singleton pregnancies with twin pregnancies, and when we looked at across the whole group, we found that maternal depression increased fetal self-touch. Now, this is an interesting finding because after birth, lots of studies have been done with depression, with depressed mothers, but also a situation, an experimental condition, which is called the still phase. So if you look at your baby and you don't move your face at all, the baby becomes really quite disturbed. And this is what is a kind of representation of when you're depressed, because the mother can't really engage with this baby. And they touch themselves much more in that situation. Now, what we found here is that when the mother had depression, the fetuses seem to touch more themselves, okay? But then when we looked at the twins, because that's a very specific situation, of course, and we looked here at self-touch and other touch, because here we could look at other touch, what we found is that maternal stress decreased the other touch, the twin touching the other twin. But when maternal depression was increased, then they would actually increase the other twin touch. So again, this is a finding which is really interesting, because you can perhaps see here the starts of a social engagement in the twins. And we want to do this study again with a much bigger group, but also then follow up postnatally to see whether the body maps are different for twins compared to singletons. What do fetuses do when they hear mouth movements? As I mentioned before, I actually did a study in Nepal where I kind of had newborn babies, and they were literally born in the same room where I was. And I kind of said O to them or A to them. I couldn't stick out my tongue. So what you can see here is when I made an O movement, the baby would actually imitate it. And these are newborn babies. Basically, they hadn't yet, their umbilical cord wasn't yet cut, okay? And here is a baby where I said A, and you can see the widening of the mouth. And what I thought, well, these were newborn babies, and as I said, I'm very interested in what are the beginnings of things. So I then thought, well, with the fetuses, of course, we can't project these kind of images onto the retina because with the fetuses that wouldn't work, but we can project sounds into the womb environment. And so that's what we did. And we kind of played ma, ma, ma to these fetuses. And like, if you think about ma, you open up your mouth, and this is the kind of movement we looked at here. And we compared it to the O movement without, like, it was for a group of fetuses who had not heard any sounds, and a group of fetuses who had heard the ma, ma, ma sounds. And we compared the mouth movements for those two groups. And this O kind of movement is something which happens actually as often naturally in the fetal environment compared to the R movement. So what we expected is if the fetus is actually imitated ma, we would see more of this mouth opening. And this is actually what we found. Here, I want to show you that with the fetus. So there's a baseline of a fetus, and you can see the nose, the ears.
Ma, ma.
And then they heard ma, ma, ma.
Ma, 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 ma.
And there's the mouth.
Ma, 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 ma.
So you can see, I mean, we statistically, of course, analyze that, but you can see they actually open their mouths widely, hearing this ma sound. Now, what about the attachment? So coming now from the parent's view, Campbell talks about the visible humanity of the fetus. So basically, when you have got very young fetuses like this one is 24 weeks, it looks less, you can see the kind of what parents would see a smile kind of movement. It looks less like a baby. It's still very, very thin, it needs to kind of fatten up a bit. And there you can see the comparison of the other baby. Also making a smile. So you can see that basically as they grow older, they seem to become more baby-like, and that might have an influence on attachment. So here's just an example of what happens before birth and then after birth. There is a real resemblance, and you can see it in the later stages of pregnancy. Now, we did like one study, which is not published, of fathers' attachment to their fetus, so at 24, 28, 32, and 36 weeks gestation. And what you find is that as fathers came to these scans, they seem to kind of get more attached compared to mothers who seem to be more or less in the same amount of attachment, because of course they feel their fetus, they are connected to the fetus from the start. So in order to get fathers engaged, perhaps it would be quite good to have these 4D images to show them, here's your baby, you can see resemblances with that baby. And of course, father support of the pregnant woman is really, really, or partner support of the pregnant woman is really, really important for the pregnancy itself. So fathers do play a big role, or at least supportive partners play a big role in how the pregnancy proceeds. Here I have got now, is it all right, this YouTube video, which I've designed for parents actually to get more to know about how it is in the womb for the fetus, and it is on YouTube as well. This stopped.
Yes, it just suddenly stopped.
Well, what do you want me to do? You want me to restart, or I don't know what to do.
I think it would be really lovely to see it, Nadia, if that's possible.
Yeah, I can try it.
We can try again.
Yeah, I don't know why it didn't work. Perhaps I can show you just the video, you know.
Yes.
Not have it embedded in the in my.
Yeah, sometimes it plays a little bit funny when they're embedded into a PowerPoint.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No, don't worry, that's fine. I just wondered if there are any questions at the moment, and anybody watching, please do think about any questions for Nadia. She's happy to take those. I mean, it's just so fascinating, and I think what is so lovely in your presentation is the films. There's just nothing like seeing these little babies and get that. Okay, let's try this one then.
Okay, so I started in between where we stopped. So that was it.
That is.
I mean, I have got in my other slide just a thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Nadia. I mean, that is just lovely. And as I was saying earlier, you just bring it to life with these wonderful images.
Yeah.
And that's a lovely film also for the parents at the end.
Yeah.
And it just really, it kind of shows how much babies communicate actually already.
Yeah, and how they, I suppose, are socialized already in the womb. And the socialization comes through sound, through light, you know, depending on which country you live in, whether you are in the summer or in the winter, you know, there's more light coming into the womb environment, but also taste. We are currently looking at taste and how taste after birth might be influenced by what the fetus is actually tasting pre-birth. So there are loads and loads of things to still be done, you know. So anybody interested in it, I mean, I'm up for doing more research. And if we get anybody who can come up with funding, that would be even better.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions, Sarah?
Yeah, Inga, do you think you could unpin Nadia just so we can all see each other?
I will.
Yes, we have had a couple of questions, which is nice, and also some really lovely comments, Nadia. People are saying it's so interesting and incredible research, and wow, amazing. So, and a couple of requests as well to know where we can see that video. Did you say it was over on YouTube?
On YouTube, but now since I've shown it on yours, coming
then yeah, that's fine. Well,
I can give you the link. It's Baby and You on YouTube.
Yeah, we
but
can.
I can
we can share it later.
Yeah, I can send you the link for that.
Thank you. No, it was really nice to see it all together in a video. So one of the things that you talked about, which was really interesting, was kind of handed preference. And one of the questions was, so it says, handed preference is so fascinating. I presume there has not been any longitudinal studies yet on how this translates to later functional hand preference or motor skill development. So no, a question about longer term.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we need to do. I mean, there's some research and some, but it's controversial. Some people claim that there's a relationship and other people claim there's not. So it is really still up in the air. And as I said, like what I found was like reduced handedness, reduced right-handedness, rather than that they were right or left-handed. So there are lots and lots of explanations of why some fetuses might actually move with their right hand more or the left hand more. So lots of research still to be done in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is, I think it's the thing with research, isn't it? When you start looking into something, you just kind of open up lots that you want to know more and more. But
exactly,
it's an amazing area to learn about. And then there was just one other question about have there been any studies to show babies' response to a mother singing, like turning their head or changing their heart rate?
Yeah, mothers singing is important, and at the moment I think there's also a study going on in London with regard to mothers singing in the neonatal intensive care unit. So mothers singing does have a positive effect on the fetus. So I haven't done the research on singing, so I can't really say very much about singing. I have only done things because I'm interested in language development. So I've done things on language. But there is research out there looking at maternal singing, but also, for example, listening to the radio. That, one thing which I forgot to say is fetuses actually have a memory. So what they hear prenatally is actually something they react to postnatally. So if you always listen to Radio 4, for example, the news, and you hear that, or the Archers is another one, you know, you hear the sound like for 9 months, that fetus will remember that, okay? So there is definitely memory, and there's definitely something to do with mothers singing to the babies as well, you know? And mother singing as well is something which will soothe the mother herself. And because she becomes more calm and less stressed, perhaps, that might make also a difference to how the fetus reacts to the singing, you know?
Yeah.
But newborn babies and babies themselves, they love singing anyway. So if you are a new mother, then you definitely will be singing a lot.
Yeah,
Mm.
definitely. I remember, Nadia, when we chatted before, you mentioned it was really interesting about 4D scans and just the benefit that it is for parents if they are able to get a 4D scan, and obviously you would love for them to be accessible for everyone.
Yeah, I really like, well, what I showed you there is, for example, it is important that the partner, you know, of the mother is supported during pregnancy. I mean, well, so that the mother is supported by the partner during pregnancy, okay? And by actually engaging the partner in the pregnancy, that helps with that support. And what I found is like just talking to parents, you know, talking to fathers, or even like other partners, you know, like that, in fact, they seem to kind of engage with the pregnancy more. And you can understand it. If it's not in your own body, of course, you don't have that feeling. Whereas if it's in your body, you constantly are aware that there is a growing person in you, you know. So it's really, really important, I think, to give the partners support in engaging with the pregnancy more. And the best way of doing that might be actually to show them the scans, to show what this baby can do, or this unborn baby can do. And it's fascinating. I mean, I can look at it all day long. It's always, well, we are not allowed to, okay? So basically we have to kind of stick to the British Medical Ultrasound Society guidelines, which means we kind of look at it around 15 to 20 minutes. But every time when there is a new baby and you can see a new scan, it is absolutely fascinating to see what they can do, you know. Mm.
Oh, definitely.
And I would suggest, like, it would be worthwhile to investigate for the NHS to actually give a 4D scan, because even to give explanations, okay, because there's one study which actually looked at 4D versus 2D scans, and they didn't find a difference. But I actually think it will make a difference if you explain to parents what they can see, because just seeing the scan without having any explanations, which was a study where it was an experimental study, you know, but it's difficult for you to actually see the image. You have to understand, oh yes, here's the head, here are the eyes, there's the nose, there's the mouth, and here are the fingers, you know, or toes, in order to actually get an image of that fetus, you know. And I think once you get this image, from what I have heard from partners who were doing the pregnancy, doing these scans with me, I always ask them, and they always find it fascinating, you know. They might be very reluctant, first of all, to come to the scan, but once they are there, they are really engaged and really enjoy it. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question. So I'm just reading it. So this lady says, I work in perinatal services and have a few families that have lost a baby previously and are struggling or anxious with bonding with their new baby, so their bump. Is there anything more that you would recommend as a professional to support these ladies and families?
It is really, really difficult. And in some ways, they're not bonding during that time, having lost babies before. is actually something very naturally. These mothers are protecting their feelings of loss by not yet bonding with the fetus too much, you know. So I suppose because they are so anxious, I think it might be quite helpful to have quite a lot of appointments to monitor the development of this fetus, to see that everything is in order, everything is healthy and developing normally. So I can see that as one possible way of actually helping them, you know. But you can also understand if the mother has lost several babies and is then in danger of losing yet another one, it might be better for them not to bond at that early stage, just for their own protection, you know.
I suppose that there could be things though that they try and do to help themselves feel less anxious, which will kind of have a positive impact on the baby, even if it isn't kind of active bonding at first.
Yeah,
just keeping.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, because less anxious means you get more information from healthcare professionals. So like if you are a mother who is in danger of losing a baby, then normally I suppose you will be monitored more often, but then also reassuring them perhaps with pictures, things like that, you know, might actually help them to feel less anxious about it, you know, and also understanding the pregnancy and what is normal and what is not normal in the pregnancy. For example, feeling the baby at certain times of day, you know, you can do this, the counting, of course, of movements, but that's very, very subjective, because some mothers are more sensitive, or also depending on how the fetus lies in the womb, you will be able to feel the kicking more or less. So having more scans and more interaction with the healthcare professionals, I think would alleviate the anxiety. And that, of course, would be good for fetal development, because we do know that anxiety has an effect on how the fetus develops. But it's also really, really important to think, just because the mother's anxious or stressed at the during pregnancy, or even depressed during the pregnancy, it not all is lost, you know. Like after birth, you have got like a new start, and you can kind of start and develop your relationship with this baby. It's just that my research is to show what we need to do, and that's actually what the Royal College of Midwives says, you know, that we need to support pregnant women in their pregnancy more with regard to mental health issues, you know. So I just am one of the people who say we should give them more support. For example, giving them 4G scans, giving them information so that they feel reassured, rather than having to look up on the internet, you know, and doing this kind of Googling and then getting really worried, because of course pregnancy is quite a difficult time. And so lots of things can happen. And once you start to research that, you might get really, really anxious. So it's much better to have your healthcare professional actually following through, and potentially, I think having the same midwife who sees you before birth and then during birth is also quite a nice idea, because you can already develop a relationship and a connection with that person, so feel more bonded with that person and trusting in that person's views. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Nadia. It's yeah, a lot of information, and so important as well. And I really do like the idea of using the scans with fathers, as you say, and really sort of get a feeling and a sense of who this little person is. And I also get a sense when you're talking about the kind of a little bit of excitement every time you see a new baby and a new scan.
Yeah.
And it just kind of makes me think about what Dr. Brazelton always said, which was look at the baby and listen to the baby, because they are all individuals. They are all different.
Oh yeah, you asked me actually about the individuals once. I can say something about being individual in terms of after birth, because when I saw these babies in Nepal after birth, I definitely had the impression that there were different people, like there were different personalities. Not every baby is the same at all, you know. So yeah, it's true.
So such an important message, and it's great to see that kind of already actually there in the room, and why wouldn't it be? But I think you really brought the baby in the room. You have kind of really opened our minds. I hope everybody else has found that as well. It's made the baby, of course the baby's live, but it's really made it live, and wonderful research. And if anybody is interested in any of Nadia's research, then yeah, do contact her or contact us at the Brazelton Centre, and we can forward your email to anybody interested. And tomorrow, our last day of Baby Communication Week, I'm going to have a chat with 3 dads, and they're all coordinators for Dads Matters. So I'm joined by 2 of them from Manchester and 1 in Gloucestershire. So do join me if you can tomorrow on Facebook. Where they're talking about actually being dads and how we can work with dads, something that I'm quite interested in. How do we get better at working with dads and involving dads in services around babies? And they also talk about how they use the newborn behavioural observation, so the EMBO, with their dads, because a lot of them are trained in that method. So hope to see you tomorrow. And Sarah has been a complete whiz, and she's putting all of these kind of presentations onto YouTube as well. So you'll be able to go back and watch any of them at any time if you like to go back and see some of the presentations. I know I shall go back and watch Nadia's presentation. So thank you so much for watching today, and thank you again, Nadia.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Nadia. Yeah.
Okay.